So everyone's screaming altcoins are dead because Bitcoin dominance has hit 65%. But what if it's a final warning that alt season is going to kick off and they're actually going to bounce somewhat? I want to show you in this video why this is often the most painful point and why you should be paying more attention to altcoins. Now, I'm openly honest and I say not everything's going to bounce. Not everything's going to be a previous cycle sort of narrative, i.e. 30x gains, high tide rises or ships malarkey. But be mindful of fear. Don't get greedy at the bottoms. Let me know in the comments below if you're ready for an alt season, and more importantly, leave a like if you believe in your altcoins. So Bitcoin dominance on the screen. Okay, it's 65%. That's cool. That's fine. I'm happy with that. And it isn't often referred to as the be all and end all, but for a lot of people, when you're looking at altcoins, it should be. However, I say this, don't use it in isolation because you might get a little bit caught out. This is often the beginning of where the end is for Bitcoin rallies. It should, if history repeats, obviously, altcoins should come into play because we are at the highs, okay? The highs. And I often say we probably won't go as low as previous cycles because I think the dilution of altcoins and the fatigue of altcoin holders are smashed. And I'll come on to that in a bit. But the reality is here. We're going to get a bounce at some point. And we'll come on to why that's important in a second. Now, I've just watched one of Ben Cowen's videos recently about Bitcoin dominance, and I agree with some parts. The macro side of it's really good, but I do disagree with one thing, which is obviously the market psychology side of it. Now, with altcoins bleeding, and that is often the point where you need to pay attention. When it's really horrible, sentiment is low, and I'll come on to that in a bit, but we're going to probably get a bounce at some point. And I've been talking a lot on my YouTube videos about this, the stable currency dominance, where we could be going back down to the lows. We are forming a little bit of a, we have changed character here. It looks a bit of a trend change, i.e. this is going down, which is obviously good for existing liquidity to go into the market again. That will then hopefully allow altcoins to breathe. And if we're at a point where alts are at a really low point and there's a bit of market interest with that low liquidity in them, you might get those bounces. We've seen that recently with a couple of assets, Hive, for example, Sui, and a couple of others. So maybe we continue. Now on the screen here, I've put the flashbacks essentially to previous alt seasons. Now this is like the big mega seasons, by the way. Only a 4-week, 5-week sort of run back in 2017, which you probably may not remember if you weren't around. But yeah, it was a very, very big mental rally. The next one was obviously 2021. A lot of people talk about this as a QE rally, which fair enough, I understand, but there's also periods in time where we have had little mini alt seasons in the past, and that's what I miss about the previous markets was we used to get quite a few little alt seasons, but realistically, when we're high, we tend to drop, and that's kind of the history of it, right? That doesn't mean it's going to be amazing. That doesn't mean it's going to be long term. It doesn't mean anything. But what it means is the psychology of the market is simple. High dominance would indicate altcoin pain. But altcoin pain would often mean the whole sayings and the phrase of buy the fiat, buy the blood, even if it's your own. All those, you get the idea, right? So you've got to talk about the situation that we might well get a rotation. Doesn't mean we're going to get a big one. And I know people in my comments will often disagree with me, but I don't see the top 100 altcoins all doing a 30, 40, 50x is like the previous cycles with matured since then. But a bounce? Oh yeah, definitely. Now, I know if you're sitting in your back garden in the Cotswolds or wherever you may be, you probably don't give a shit about this, but ultimately the macro pain is somewhat priced in. The Fed policy is probably priced in. We know it's going to be a rate pause today, but we all know that if Jerome Powell says something hawkish, it's going to be bad. If it's going to be dovish, those signals may well be rocket fuel for altcoins, certainly at the lows when dominance is high and as stable currencies in terms of that situation, existing liquidity is starting to rotate downwards, which is always good. But today is a decision day. Doesn't mean trade it, just means watch and shoot, ladies and gentlemen. And the obvious in the room is when you mix together hopium and bottoms and low liquidity, as I mentioned before, you're going to get a bit of a sentiment change. The sentiment is crushed. It's capitulation. And people would often say to me a couple of weeks ago, you were so bearish on altcoins. And yeah, because there was nothing to be bullish about. There wasn't, right? But when data changes and you start seeing that, oh, hold on a minute, existing liquidity like USD stable currencies are starting to return to the market a little bit. ETF volume has increased a little bit. all those kind of metrics, it's good. The fear and greed is starting to slowly trickle up. Twitter sentiment is starting to creep a little bit better. But overall, altcoins, prices, your portfolio, capitulation. Simple as that. People have quit, people have given up. And I understand that. Even in my Patreon, numbers are low because people are giving up. People are quitting. But they all return. When the market bounces, they will return. I can guarantee it. By the way, link below if you want to jump in. But the reality is here, edging towards a further capitulation as things are already down 90% is often a bit dicey anyways. You don't want to be too greedy. Piggies get slaughtered, remember, right? But I often say this, there will be a bounce. It doesn't mean a full-blown, amazing 4-week rally into absolute mentalness. It just means we're going to have a bit of relief. And that would probably become an alt season, which is why you need to trade the market both ways if you can. So what we need to keep an eye on for obvious reasons and talk about it in obvious senses, and I've talked about this quite a few times, we need to wait for this to come down. Obviously, this is like the starting point. But the main chart we are all looking for, we all know it and we all can see it, is obviously what I just talked about, is the Ethereum chart. Is it going to bottom? Now, I understand why people may talk about it going lower, but reality is this is relatively quite low. You need to be thinking of the obvious in a situation of risk-reward. You're buying blood. The downside is limited, but the upside could be massive. Doesn't mean you're going to make 4, 5, 10x's on your Ethereum now, but you don't need 20x pumps these days. You just need a bit of time and a bit of patience to understand that the rally is in play, and you need to then follow it in some situations. Easier said than done, I know. You will get, caught out in the moments, but the reality is here. A strong Bitcoin is good for the market, but if their BTC pair side of it, so to speak, start rallying against what they've already had over the course of the last 6 months, 12 months, even 18 months like this, it's going to be good for the market, because reality is you could make a decent chunk of Bitcoin off this. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, and people are giving me so much shit for it, don't miss it. I know it sounds obvious, but alt seasons are always obvious in hindsight. If you wait for the headlines, you're probably too late. I am talking about this earlier than most people would, because I can see a little change in certain things, which is usually the beginning step. If your coins have already done like gigapumps, you've probably missed the boat. And now I'm openly saying, be patient. You need to wait for it to be confirmed. But you all know what's going to happen, right? Listen to this. They're going to fly. Retail's going to come back. The hype and the noise are going to continue getting louder and louder. And then all of a sudden you feel, oh, it is going up. Probably that is the time to take profit versus entry. You've got to look at that situation. But hey ho, everyone's different, right? So there we go. We're done. Leave a like if you enjoy this sort of stuff, and subscribe if you want more content like this around altcoin seasons, altcoins in general, in terms of risk on, risk off. That's kind of what I want to focus on. Video here to get your teeth into in terms of the full signal kind of situation that you need to keep an eye on every single time.